I'm Ross Reynolds from KUOW, and you have come to a panel called Game Changers for Humanity. And with me is Wayne Kramer, a guitarist. There's a Wayne Kramer Stratocaster out there. He's co-founder of the Detroit band, the MC5. He spent some time in jail. He got out of jail, and he's working on a cause that really has to do with many of the people who are incarcerated in this country. And as you'll hear, he's got some real strong feelings about the way that we do that. It's called Jail Guitar Doors, and it's actually taken its name from a song that The Clash wrote about Wayne Kramer when he was incarcerated. Over to my far left, Eric Stowe, he's from Tacoma. He co-founded in 2006 A Child's Right, which is an international relief organization. And what they're trying to do is to bring clean water to children in underdeveloped countries in some places that other organizations are not focusing on. And they recently got a new name, Splash. And they've launched projects in China, in Ethiopia, in Nepal, Thailand, and Cambodia. And Stowe has estimated they touch the lives of 250,000 children a year, giving them this very important service. A day. I want to start out by maybe getting you to trace. I want to talk about the issues you're involved in, but maybe first of all, you could talk about your journey to those issues. What got you involved, Wayne Kramer, first of all, with wanting to get music and to people in prison?
I'd have to say it had something to do with the fact that I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict. And at the core of alcoholism and drug addiction is selfishness. And so for me to accept that about myself and then want to change and do something about it, the antidote for selfishness is to think about somebody else for a change, to do something for somebody else for a change, which is a radical idea for me since my shallowness knows no limits. I'm laughably inauthentic. I'm in fact ridiculous. Those positions I can defend. But the idea of being of service to my fellows, of reaching out and doing something for somebody else, had some immediate appeal to me. And once I tested the waters, I found out that the appeal was deeper and deeper, and that it was really the way to a good life. That the secret to a life well lived is a life worth living, a life with meaning. And so to be able to combine my ability as a musician, my history as a drug war prisoner, my history as a political radical, all into one bundle in trying to help prisoners, help generate this conversation about the disgrace of America's prisons, and to work for political and legislative reform, justice reform, all seem to fall into line for me with jailguitardoors.org.
Eric Stowe, how about you? How did you begin to understand the severity of the problem of water in developing countries? What drew you to that issue?
Sure. Mine is not as cool. I worked in international adoption for a number of years and spent a lot of time in orphanages in multiple countries, mostly throughout Asia, and saw this grand disparity that in the same cities that an orphanage can be in, you could have a fast food chain or a multinational hotel that has potable water 24/7 in really high volume, really high quality, really low maintenance. How can you convert existing infrastructure and systems and actually leverage those for underserved populations? So focused on orphanages first, and now we focus on schools, street shelters, feeding centers, rescue homes for trafficked girls, and pediatric clinics. So six types of sites. Our smallest is in Ethiopia, where we serve about 18,000 kids a day. Our largest, which we're going to announce in 6 months, is, this one's pretty cool. It's every orphanage in China will have clean water in the next 6 months. We've been working on this for the last 5 years in concert with the Chinese government. So we work at different scales, but basically saying, why don't we target a new population with existing infrastructure?
See, I associate water supply with the water supply that goes to everyone in a certain geographic area, but you're focusing on on orphanages on small places in certain areas. How does that work?
We only work in cities. So we're working in places with, the great migration trend. No one in the world is moving to the countryside, right? I mean, everybody is moving from rural to urban. And so we're focused on those megalopolises, on the peripheral poor. Orphanages don't see the same water quality that guests at a Hilton have, or peripheral schools, et cetera. So we're focused on those really, it's a niche population that we're serving, absolutely. But urban, kids, water.
And we should point out, it's not just a matter of, there are so many serious diseases associated with bad water too. Right?
Yep. Yes.
Yes. So what are some of them? What are the kind of the, what is bad water kind of, what's the knock on?
So when I worked in international adoption, over 50% of the kids who were coming home from, uniting with parents and coming home from China had Giardia. Several had E. coli, but over 50%, I mean, that's massive. A lot of that was food handling, but a significant portion was from unsafe water, and the baby bottles, in the food preparation, things like that.
Why isn't the water good in these places?
Poor distribution, bad breaks in the line, antiquated plumbing, overpopulation, urban runoff. I mean, the myriad things going on in these cities. Like Kathmandu is one of our biggest projects right now, and 100% of the water we treat is well water, which is seen in, from most folks, wells are the panacea, right, to the problem, when in fact in Kathmandu they're part of the problem. It's really shitty water. Mm-hmm. So.
And I want to get to maybe some of the specifics about how
sure.
you get water to
Absolutely.
these places in a moment. But Wayne, I wonder if you could expand a little bit on what you're doing with your organization, Jazz Guitar Doors, and what you're trying to accomplish in the prisons.
Sure, but I just want to if I may, just sidetrack a little bit to talk about what Eric's doing as being proof that one guy can make a difference. I mean, he's making a difference, a real difference in the real world. And, I don't think our enemy is Republicans or capitalism. Our enemy is cynicism. Our enemy is apathy. The kind of things that we do in the prisons, the kind of things that Eric's doing, this is about engaging the world. I think we're in a time of great disappointment. Our grand institutions of religion and politics have failed us. They seem to be ineffectual. And this gives rise to kind of nihilism, meaninglessness. And it can take a soft form, which is, I'm just going to get a new iPad and I'm going to take care of myself and my people and I'm cool and I got a good job and I got my money. And then it can take a hard form, which is, of course, Al-Qaeda and gangsterism and these poor lost souls that go into movie theaters and murder people because nobody's listening. No one's paying attention to them. And I think the solution to that meaninglessness is an unlimited commitment to ethical action, the kind of action that Eric's taking, to do something outside of your normal everyday routine. Now, I don't mean ticking a box on the internet. I mean getting off your ass and going out and doing something in the world, meeting some other people and trying to make something happen. As to engage in the world, because one guy, you're making an unbelievable difference. I mean, the numbers you just talked about kids getting clean water, that's shocking, and that's not at the highest level. That's from the bottom up. That's on the level that we're on with our friends, with our neighbors. So the kind of stuff that we do in Jail Guitar Doors is my particular, I'm uniquely qualified because I'm an ex-prisoner and I'm a musician, and this is something that makes sense to me, and I have an ability to work with prison bureaucracies, and I have friends in the guitar business, and I can kind of work these things around a little bit. And I also am grandiose enough to think that I go to Washington and I meet with senators and Congress people, and I met with at the White House with Barack's Special Assistant for Justice and Social Programs. I'm crazy enough to think that I could push them along, nudge them along, at least to get this conversation going. So, I mean, you know, there's a million little tales in there, but I think that's the big picture.
I mean, getting music to people in prison, I think that it's important to understand the context of what's going on in prisons, and not many of us appreciate that, and the fact that the idea of rehabilitating in prisons has kind of fallen into disfavor, and part of what you're trying to do is maybe what should be going on there in the first place?
Well, yeah, you know, I believe in law and order. I mean, that might sound a little weird coming from me, but I believe in the rule of law. I believe in safe streets. I believe in the need for places like prisons. I believe that there are a very small percentage of people that are so damaged that they need to be locked up. But that leaves the other 90% of the people that we have in prison. And in America today, we have over 2.5 million of our brothers, sisters, fathers, uncles, friends, mothers under lock and key. Almost half of them are nonviolent drug offenders. We've been on a prison building, prison filling up rampage over the last 30 years. It's been political expediency for politicians, you know, to be tough on crime. And what's happened is that not only are we not safer, we're less safe, because there is no rehabilitation in American prisons today. What we have is a rejection of the very concept of rehabilitation and an embracing of punitive incapacitation. In other words, we're locking you up, you're going to rot, we're throwing away the key. And what we end up with is men and women sentenced to unbelievably severe sentences, more severe than at any time in human history, locked up for periods of time and inculcated in a world that's a world of violence, racism, defeat, bitterness, and then we let them go. And they come back and they live next door to you and me. So who do we want living next door? A guy who has had a job training, therapy, drug and alcohol treatment, has a support system to work with when he comes out, or one of the hundreds of thousands that are being released now with no help while they're locked up.
I mean, you mentioned job training and just being able to get some help with substance abuse problems. Why do you think bringing music into their lives in prison is important? And maybe you could also talk a little bit about, I mean, you were a musician before you went to prison, what a difference it made for you.
Sure. What we found is, and there is some data on this. There were a couple studies done on the efficacy of arts and corrections. But what we found through our own both anecdotal and empirical experience is that prison is designed to make a person feel worthless. And being creative is a great argument against worthlessness. So if I can put a guitar in a prisoner's hands and he can learn to tell his story in a song, he can write it down in a song, he's found a new way to express who he is that's non-confrontational. You know, people in prison know how to express themselves, but it's usually negatively. This gives him a new way to tell his story and a new way to interact with the people around him, a new way to be somebody in the world. Now he's not just a number and a fuck-up. He's an artist. He's a musician. He can play the guitar. And what we found is that it gives them a way to process their problems that they never had before. It puts them in touch with their own humanity. And if they can get in touch with their own humanity, then they can start to be in touch with somebody else's humanity. It's not everything, but it's the one thing that we've found that can inculcate a change of heart. You know, I have a deputy friend in LA County. He said, Wayne, it's not just about education. If I educate a criminal, I've got an educated criminal. He said, it needs to be a change of heart. And art is the only thing we've found. Music, writing, sculpture, dance, theater, any of these activities that require one to go inside and be creative can bring about that change of heart. That's the beginning of the hard work of rehabilitation. It's the beginning. It's the spark.
Eric, I want to talk with you a little bit more about how you do what you do. And as I understand it, there are aid groups that are working in rural areas on water issues, but that's not your piece of this work. Is that correct?
No, we would fail miserably if we worked in the countryside. I mean, we need some source of water. We need some type of electricity. And we need a lot of kids, right? In the countryside, traditionally, when you dig a well, it serves about 250 people on average. Our systems are designed for several thousand daily use. I mean, we have literally, and I mean this literally, not figuratively, we've stolen McDonald's model. Right? We looked at their supply chains, their distributors, their manufacturers, how they do their filtration, where they do their water quality tests. So much so that in our first year of operation, we did 15 projects in China. And the next 6 months, we'll do 250. We only have 2 full-time staff in China. We've tapped into McDonald's distributor chain. So the same people who install an entire McDonald's are now working in the orphanages, installing the water purification equipment, servicing it over time, making sure that the maintenance schedules are up to date, using the same water quality labs. So when I say that we're tapping into existing infrastructure, we would fail without it. And one of the biggest issues with the water sector as a whole, and the water sector is loosely defined those groups that are trying to end water poverty globally. The biggest issue with the sector, to the quick, 3 decades of work, several $1 billion worth of investment, and the baseline measurements right now are that 40% of all projects undertaken by water interventions globally have failed. Within their first year of operation, 40% of projects fail.
Why do they fail?
No infrastructure, no supply chains. It's something as small as a little bushing, a bearing breaks on a wellhead, and communities have to trek back into their original source of water. And so they pass the first well that was put in by Agency X, pass the second well. These are all well-meaning individuals and groups, but they didn't have the focus on actually establishing good, solid supply chains, because once something small breaks, that community has no point of remedying it, mitigating that failure. So we have to use existing supply chains to scale.
So you start at a place that has water, but you're going to purify that water to get it to these populations.
Our focus is on quality, not quantity.
And how do you do it? How do you purify the water?
Precisely how McDonald's does it. We use the exact same system that they use. So I got a chance to sneak into my first McDonald's in 2004. Went into the back, paid someone up front, went into the back, wrote down the parts numbers of the equipment, and started contacting the manufacturer. If McDonald's can do this, why can't we do this at scale? Right? We're actually, by the end of this year, we'll be in more cities, almost tenfold than McDonald's is in China. We're going to be in 670 cities by the end of the year. McDonald's is only in a couple dozen. And it's because we've been able to tap into their mentality, right? Corporations want 100% coverage of a particular population. They never achieve it, but that's their end goal, and that's what we want. We want every orphanage in China. We want every school in Kathmandu. We want total coverage.
I know in talking to other people who've done this kind of work in countries, you come up against a lot of cultural barriers that drop down. Oh yeah, here's another person from the developed world who wants the help.
Love
like, I wonder if you encounter that, and what kind of things, like maybe even some examples of what you've encountered and how you've overcome it.
We've been really fortunate. When I worked in international adoption, there was a lot of, there were several conversations around bribe, right? We want to get in diapers, we want to get in formula, we want to get other things that weren't sustainable in the orphanages, and there was someone always waiting for a handout. But clean water for kids, we have never been approached with a bribe. I mean, it's an equalizer. You know, there's no hidden agenda. We're not politicizing anything. We're not a religious organization. Everybody gets clean water for kids. So we haven't had any of those issues. But it wasn't a founding principle, but it's now a foundational one. We absolutely are out of every country within 15 years of starting operations. So right now, our trajectory is by 2020, we will be serving over 1 million kids in 16 countries. By 2030, we'll be serving 0. We will be out of every one of those countries. Our goal is to set up the infrastructure, really catalyze the existing kind of environment. There's no shortage of overly skilled, underemployed communities in the places we work. So our goal is to really create that infrastructure around filtration, extend what McDonald's has done, but focused on philanthropy and serving kids, and getting the hell out of the way. So we're not trying to distort economies for the long term, to perpetuate cycles of dependence. We're looking to go in, create what we do, show the theory of change, proof of concept, and get the hell out. So most communities are very, very receptive, knowing that we're not just another NGO.
And when it comes to establish, I would assume that if you are getting a clean water source to young people in an orphanage, if I'm living next door to that orphanage, I want some of this. Doesn't everyone want to go to the orphanage now to get the clean water?
No. They're a pretty isolated community to begin with. So most Chinese cities, actually every mid to large-sized city in China has an orphanage. Most people in the surrounding community don't even know what it is or where it is. They're very, very isolated. These kids are hyper-institutionalized. They rarely get out into the larger community, so most people don't know that larger story. Now, when we work in a school, absolutely community members want to start accessing that water. Or when we work in a feeding center or rescue home, absolutely. But orphanages are pretty isolated to begin with, very secretive populations. So
how about with the schools? Does it tax the system to have it all of a sudden providing clean water for maybe many more people than it was designed for?
That's a good question. Mostly it's the kids' parents, and the school and their administrators that are allowed access to it. If they want to provide for the larger community, they absolutely can. The systems are rated at about 12 gallons a minute. That's a lot of water. But it's up to the school if they can actually have that financial wherewithal to be able to provide the initial water source. Because it still costs money to pull water from a well or a municipal line or from a river. We just treat it and make sure that it's absolutely not comparable to what my child would have, but equal to what you'd get here. So,
Wayne Kramer, one of the things that you do is perform in prisons, and you've performed in Sing Sing, I noticed a few years ago. When you show up, are people familiar with your music career? Does the fact that you are a known person in the rock world maybe generate more interest on their part to be receptive to getting a guitar and going to a music class?
I'm not actually a rock star. I get away with a lot, and people that are in the world of rock that follow bands and that, they know who I am. But in the general public, they don't know who Wayne Kramer is, and the MC5 is a minor footnote, and they just don't follow this kind of stuff. And the same, of course, is true in the prisons, because actually people in prison are the same as us, and they have the same fears and the same ambitions and the same information that we have. So oftentimes they don't have any idea who I am. If I bring Tom Morello with me from Rage Against the Machine, they know who Tom is. They know who Gilby Clarke is from Guns N' Roses. They know who Slash is. And we kind of just use that as a really delightful carrot, Because actually I'm not encouraging anyone to go into the music business, least of all prisoners. I think people should try to get real jobs and, do the kind of stuff Eric does, or like everybody in this conference, digital technology and marketing and things that have a real, that open out like that. Being a musician is not there's absolutely zero security in it. There's less jobs than there are candidates for those jobs. It's very competitive. But what I hope gets across is that playing music is important. Not being a rock star, not having a career as a professional musician, but that music itself is important. That people get together and they sing songs and they play their guitars. That's important. The feeling that creates amongst a small group of friends. You're in the living room and you're singing some songs and you're jamming. That's a ball. And that's enough reason to do it. The sense of community that you get out of it, the sense of connection. We put on shows in prisons because prisons are so underserved. We did a concert this summer at the maximum security facility at Lancaster in the California State Prison, which is the largest maximum security facility in the state. And we did a concert for a yard in that prison that's known as the Honor Yard. And prisoners themselves invented this idea of the Honor Yard, that if you made it a couple years with no incidents on your record, that if you agreed to swear off violence, if you swear off drug and alcohol abuse, if you swear off racism, if you swear off gang affiliations, you could live on this yard with no drama. They have very, very few violent incidents on this yard. And many people on this yard are life prisoners or life without the possibility of parole prisoners, men that are going to live there forever. And so we brought a concert there, and I got a couple letters in the mail from two different guys who had been in prison over 30 years who said they had never seen a concert. They got locked up when they were 18, 19 years old, wow, and had never witnessed a live concert. So things like that, you know, to me that makes it worth it, you know, just to bring a show into that community, to let them know, just to send a message that not everybody out here believes in locking you up and throwing away the key, that some people know you're here and they care about you.
A lot of us have the Johnny Cash Live at Folsom Prison album in our heads when we think about performing in prison. And of course, Johnny Cash sang about his life and his run-ins with the law, and I shot a man just to see him die. And the material obviously appealed to that audience at Folsom Prison. When you guys are performing, do you tailor your songs at all to stuff that you know that's going to connect with them?
Well, we don't limit it.
Right.
I mean, like, we do Jailbreak. You know, we do, you know, Wish You Were Here. I sing Redemption Song, The Harder They Come. But sometimes Billy will dig up.
Billy Bragg.
Yeah, Billy Bragg will dig up old prison songs. Mostly, we're just trying to put on a good show. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think that you've mentioned to me is that part of the reason is that there are not these facilities in prison or these abilities. You mentioned when you were in jail, there was actually a band room and there were some instruments there and people could get together and perform. But since that time, what's changed in the prison system that's kind of eliminated those sorts of programs?
Sure. Since American politicians discovered the gold mine of getting tough on crime, and it's bipartisan. We can't put it on the Republicans because the Democrats are as equally guilty of ratcheting up the war on drugs, which is the greatest failure of social policy in America's domestic history. I heartily recommend you see The House I Live In.
I second that motion.
Yeah, a new documentary which tells this story on a very personal level. You know, this war on drugs has been on for 30 years. It's cost $1 trillion. And today, any of us can go out on any street in America and buy higher quality, cheaper cocaine and heroin than I could 30 years ago when I was using this stuff. So it's a complete, utter failure. But that didn't stop money being poured into more severe legislation and prison building under the guise that we would somehow be safer by just locking the problem up. And what happened is they got so good at it, they can lock so many people up that they had to build so many prisons that they couldn't afford programs anymore. That all they can afford is guards and more cell space. So libraries were removed from prisons, sports equipment, you know, in California, prisoners don't have weights to lift anymore. You can't lift weights. I get a lot of mail that says, you know, we used to have a music program here, but we don't anymore. Guys that have been down a long time. Oh yeah, we had some band gear, but it all broke and the prison doesn't have any money for anymore. Well, there's no money for any of these programs because all the money has gone to security. to higher fences, to more sophisticated tasers and more cell space. So I would be discouraged by all this because it seems like it's such a problem. You know, bad laws are very easy to pass. They're very hard to undo. This is going to take a long time. I know I may not see this in my lifetime. It may take that long. It will end. This era of mass incarceration will end. But the good news is that, you know, people made this mess and people can fix it. You know, this is not something over there, some gigantic monolithic entity that we can't touch. You know, people actually have the power, and only people from the bottom up can fix this. I mean, you know, I still dig Barack. I'm going to vote for him, but I don't expect him to handle this. In fact, his assistant told me he ain't going to handle it. She said, "You got nothing coming from us. We're working on some reentry programs, but that's it." So unless we pressure them, and we can do that, that's the way our system is set up. We can pressure our representatives to be accountable for the terrible crime against humanity, crime against our own people, and mostly sick people. I mean, you know, almost all these guys committed their offenses because they were loaded, they were high, they needed the money for more dope. The problem isn't the dope, the problem is the dope prohibition.
Eric, Wayne's working in an area it's not a super popular cause in America to talk about issues with prisoners and to talk about over-incarceration. The issues with the failed war on drugs didn't show up in any of the three debates. You're working on getting clean water to kids, which is kind of up there with mom and apple pie in terms of who could possibly be against that. But I'm sure you're facing big challenges in getting this to happen. What are those challenges?
Yeah, try and tell the story about providing every orphanage in China clean water, and to some groups that's just anathema, right? How dare you give anything to China? Our piece is, you know, the Chinese government has actually done incredible things for the orphan and vulnerable children population, countrywide, things that we have a lot to learn from here. A lot of abhorrent things going on in China, too. I mean, I hate the Chinese government as much as I love them for what they've done for kids, but they've done a lot. They just missed the water. So we came in and we added that one small piece to the larger ecology of what they've done. That's a hard story to tell, actually. It's pretty surprising. In the Northwest, there are so many adoptive communities. Everyone here knows a family with an adopted child from China. You know, 50,000 children from China now live in the U.S. through adoption. But there's some communities that I speak in that's just, people get really riled up. Like, how dare you? And it's like, what do you mean, how dare me? It's clean water for kids, right?
All right, I'll play devil's advocate on that one.
Sure.
Why China? I mean, there's probably a lot of places,
Sure.
and why in China we know is like developing really quickly. It's
Sure.
a wealthy country.
Sure.
Why not other countries that don't have the resources
Absolutely.
China has?
To the quick of it, because I'd worked in China for 6 years prior, I had the relationship with the government. I was able to convince them. We're the only NGO I know of worldwide that has unfettered access to every orphanage in the country. I mean, Xinjiang, Tibet, every vulnerable population of orphanages we actually have access to. We have a red seal from Beijing that works in all 31 provinces and municipalities. So that's spectacular. One, so is access. Two, the Chinese government was already reestablishing what the orphanage kind of infrastructure and system looks like, right? They wiped out all the smaller orphanages, merged those with the better performing ones, retrained the caregivers, built out physical rehabilitation units, all these incredible things. Had a lot more community access to basic health care in these orphanages. Again, they just missed water. So it was a perfect opportunity to be able to go at massive scale with a partner that was already fully invested. They spent tens of millions of dollars just in one province to show the proof of concept. Now they've spent billions of renminbi building out all these orphanages. So
convincing people that this is a worthy cause is one challenge. What about getting the actual work done, getting the purifiers in?
Sure.
And then what are the biggest challenges there?
Pull up what I handed you. Yeah, no, this goes into more the technical side of the talk. Getting clean water there is actually really easy, right? Again, if we're not utilizing existing infrastructure, it's pretty easy to reroute a supply chain from India into Nepal, from China into Burma. It's not terribly complex. So getting water to flow, I don't know if that's coming up or not. Well, regardless, getting water to flow is actually really easy. It's keeping it for the long term is incredibly difficult, and I think it's where the sector as a whole has absolutely failed. I mean, if we were a financial body, we would be completely regulated by the SEC. We'd probably be shut down as a sector. Again, billions lost in investment over the last 3 decades just because of really poor and shitty planning. So getting water there, as you'll see in a second from these images, if they pull up, that's the easy part. How do you make sure that those systems are actually operational for the long term, right? If anyone here has given a donation through, and I wish that Razu was here today because I kind of wanted to razz Razu. They raise a lot of money. They've raised over $200 million for projects. My beef is what happens after that money is actually given to the charities. How do those charities ensure that those dollars were actually leveraged, that your impact can be measured over time? And I think it's a really, really important question. So what we're doing, whether or not they come up, we're basically making public all of our internal reports. So all of our water quality tests, all of our behavioral change and hygiene education, all of our routine maintenance reports, all of our service reports, all of our what we call our oh shit moments. When something fails, we post everything publicly in the hopes that we can show for the long term. If you give us a 10, if we're raising money through your organization or foundation and we ask for a 10-year investment, we damn sure better show what that looks like in 10 years, right? The water sector, it's really easy to show a picture of a young kid with a glass of water. That's usually on day of inauguration, maybe 6 months out, almost never after a year. So our goal is that these projects look and function the same in perpetuity. And so that's where our big struggle is. How do we keep these things going?
Well, and that's a question I'd like to follow up on, because you mentioned you want to be out of there within 15 years.
Absolutely.
I'm just guessing you look like a younger fellow. That have there been any of your projects that have gone for 15 years yet?
We're only 6 years deep, so no. We are cost modeling these out in decades. So when we put in a project, we give upfront 10 years of part supplies, maintenance, annual water quality tests, service, everything from day one. Now we're starting to model what do years 11 through 20 look like. We can't see past the first 2 decades. We don't know what it looks like yet. We're still trying to model that out. But we can no longer afford to plan in months or single-digit years. I mean, if we're going to scale like this, we need to treat this like a corporation would. And when they build their sustainability plans, they're thinking in decades, and we need to be that sophisticated as well. So when you brought up China, our end goal is that the Chinese government is paying for this. They absolutely should. They shouldn't be undertaking the filtration installation. They don't have that technical acumen. So we feel the same way in Nepal. We think that we will achieve 100% coverage of every school in Kathmandu, 500 schools by 2020. So every school with safe water, clean hands, and improved sanitation. We should not keep going. The Nepali government should be paying for that, and the organization that we're building out now should keep running with it. They should take it to Pokhara, to Nepalganj, to Mahendranagar. Every other city should be covered, but we shouldn't be the actors in that. So these photos were real simple. That's an easy photo to capture, right? I can raise a lot of money with that. Can I get the next one too? That one as well. It's this Cambodia. Next one. Those are easy, right? Those are right after a system is actually inaugurated. Next one, please. And so what we've done, I'm trying to run through it quickly. Next one is show donors and general public everything that we track internally to inform our decision-making processes, whether we pivot, whether we do course correction, how we measure success, impact, et cetera. Everything that we track internally is now publicly available. The good, bad, the indifferent. And next one, what we call our oh shit moments. So this is water from the Kanti Children's Hospital in Kathmandu. They serve 120,000 kids a year. Every one of those children and the parents have access to this water, including all the staff. Next one, please. And this is what the water looked like in 6 months. That's the last thing a donor wants to see. It's the last thing we want to see. But what we've done is we've operationalized this where this picture went directly to the donor, the same time it went to me. Right? We need to have an open conversation about how hard aid really is. I've got a couple more quick ones. This is the Kravan School in Siem Reap. They serve 450 kids. And these are all kids who live in the Angkor Wat Temple Complex in Cambodia. It was one of our highlight sites of 2009, made it into our annual report. So this is day one. This is during inauguration, right? Go to the next one, please. This is a year later, when rats ate through all the spare filters. Who knew that rats like silicone? I didn't. Go to the next one, please. And this is the water, right? They tapped into a new well. It was full of iron, rendered our system inoperable in the matter of minutes. Total failure. Now, the system is back online, but a local family foundation here, a very big one, they got notification at the same time I did in my office. So our staff, they got all the service report. They got the, obviously seeing this iron load, went right into it went into the data stream, and it goes, once we allocate a donor to a project, they get to see this stuff in real time.
So you're not afraid to tell people about things that don't work?
It has to happen. Yeah. Otherwise, we're full of shit. Because I can raise money on those first 3 photos. I can raise a lot of money on those, but that is not the story. The story is, how do you keep those systems functioning in the same way where those pictures are consistent throughout the years? And we have a lot of hiccups. We have a lot of ebb and flow. But our end goal is that those pictures are consistent day 300, day 3,000, and on.
It's a digital conference, so I got to ask you, what role has your ability to reach out to potential donors digitally had on your ability to do your work?
It's hard. We don't have the bandwidth nor staff wherewithal to be able to do this system and create it from scratch, which is what we've done. So now we actually are in the tail end, the last third, I hope, of a proposal with Google to be able to fund this at large. Global Giving, I'm not sure if you're aware of them. They're an umbrella organization that attends to 2,000 NGOs, soon to be 10,000 in the next 5 years. And our goal is to have a system like that for every one of their NGOs, right? That you have internal reporting that shows how you're measuring impact and how you're informing your decisions, and that you're allowing general public into it, not just donors. And secondly, that you're allowing real user reviews, right? What would it look like if you had a TripAdvisor-style system for NGOs? This water is excellent. It's done incredible things for our community. This water tastes like shit. You have to true up what we consider beneficiaries, their feedback against what you're telling the public. Because if I just show you my annual report, we only do good things. But if you can actually see these systems in real time function over time, you're going to see that we suck at a lot of stuff. So the goal is, how do we get closer to this ubiquitous platform where every NGO, basically, that's the front end barrier, right? If you can't show that you're actually measuring your impact and guiding your decisions on that, and that the community values your intervention, maybe you might want to rethink your organization.
We've only got less than 10 minutes left, so if you have questions, and I hope you do, step up to the microphones and you'll get a chance to talk to either of our folks up here about this. I wanted to ask you, Wayne, we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges doing this, but has your ability to have a website to reach out to people, kind of transcending some of the barriers that there used to be in the past, to get your message across about what it is you're trying to do, how has that allowed you to do your work?
Yeah. First, I want to grow up and be Eric. I want to operate on the scale that you're operating. We have to talk. The digital aspect of the organizing that we do is, in a lot of ways, the whole thing. We found, we maintain a website fairly poorly. I'm supposed to write more blogs and be more active with it. I understand that. We've actually moved a lot of our activity over to Facebook because more people go there. It's much easier to access. We can do more news reports and keep a conversation going on Facebook. Facebook, jailguitardoors.org. And we found that it's not so effective just to ask people for money. We are all the time. We need help. But what we found is, for example, I got an email from a guy whose brother was an ex-offender, an ex-addict who had died. And he was getting his life together, and he owned a music store in Texas. And the family wasn't in the music store business, and they heard about Jail Guitar Doors. And they said, well, we think our son would like the idea if you had everything that was in the music store and you recycled it over to prisoners. And we were, of course, knocked out. And I happened to be going to Texas anyway for a JGD event. So I said, tell you what, I'll rent a truck. I'll meet you there. we can load the stuff on my truck and I'll drive it back to Los Angeles. So my wife, who is much smarter than me, said, why don't we go on the internet and tell everybody what we're doing and say, you know, the truck costs this much money, gas is going to cost this much money, a couple nights in a hotel are going to cost this much money, help us out. And it was shocking when people had something specific to plug into. I mean, it was really exciting, like every couple of minutes, hey, another $100 just came in. Wow, $250 came in. Oh, $30 came in. And it went on like that for 3 days as we drove across country, typing, you know, sending out reports about what was happening. And by the time we got back to LA, we had made a couple of $1,000s, which in our world is huge, you know. So I just see that internet and digital is the way we communicate now. And I'm trying to learn. I have some other friends that are in the digital side of political organizing, and they're trying to school me. And so I think that's the future. I know you've been patient standing
Yes.
there.
What's your name and what's your question?
Yes, my name is Jairus Miller, and I'm actually worked with Charity Water in Twestival. So my question is that have you looked at the Twestival model as a possible business engagement of Web 2.0 resources for Splash? And is there a crossover from what Splash is doing by using some of the models that Charity Water has used for the sub-Saharan African continent? You mentioned Google. Just happen to know that Chris Sacca, who spun out of Google, he was actually core in helping Charity Water launch. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
No, great. So we're actually one of the 20 groups that Charity Water currently funds. So we're really quite familiar with them, and they're working on another Google grant simultaneously with ours that actually would feed into this larger system. In terms of sub-Saharan Africa, we think our largest footprint and impact is going to be in Asia. If you look at rural to urban migratory trends, dense populated cities, really crappy water, and lots of kids living on the margins, it's Asia. And the intervention that we provide is not as, I think, conducive in sub-Saharan Africa. It will be in some places, and we actually will have an East Africa footprint in Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia. But our goal is not to expand into every country. Our goal is that other people steal in the same way we've stolen from McDonald's. They steal what we're doing, leapfrog past us, and kick our ass. Mm-hmm. Right? That they're doing a much better job in 10 years than we're doing now. But the problem is there's no one in this current vacuum. No one's focused on kids, and very few organizations focused on urban. So we're having to learn as we go, but we really want people to blow us away.
Yes, back here.
Hi. Sorry, my name's Clint. I currently work with UNICEF as a consultant, and so my question is for you, Eric, regarding. Well, actually, we can talk later about supply chain and optimization and using data tracking to document that. But I'm more interested in how you engage young talent. I have a lot of friends who are recent graduates who are very skilled, who have technical skills, who want to go into developing countries, but they don't know necessarily how to find NGOs or how to find a way in. And so many are going into the Peace Corps, and for the most part, from what I've seen, the Peace Corps has not been the best program for them. And I was just wondering what alternatives you know of and can possibly present to young talent who want to get into the international development field.
Yeah, I'd love to chat with you afterwards. I swear to God, I'm an optimist, but on this subject, I'm kind of a pessimist. We only hire locally. Mm-hmm. I really feel strongly that in the cities we work in, there is no shortage, as I said earlier, of underemployed, overly skilled folks who absolutely know how to do this better and take it to scale in a way we couldn't. And I think, to your question earlier, I think we're just injecting an American perspective, which is incredibly myopic, if in fact it's just us going there to work. But that's probably not the whole scope of your question. I'd love to chat with you on it. We really don't push for U.S. citizens to work internationally.
Yeah, and I guess just to respond to that real quick, I have a friend, and she just recently went to Uganda and set up a Kickstarter page And in like the short few months since she's been there, she's been able to raise over $2,000 and to do fundraising.
It's a trade-off, man. I know.
Yeah.
I know. We're thinking. I really am trying to think in decades instead of single years. And even though it's going to kill us now, I think the return on investment is significantly higher to focus on domestic populations in the countries we already are established and will be working in. That we're really empowering those communities to be the long-term kind of contractors rather than us. I agree with you, though. It's a huge trade-off, man. And the only reason I'm into this is because I did international work. So it's a really hard juxtaposition, right? Yeah. I'm full of shit on one end if I say that you shouldn't do this, and then on the other, I think it's substantiated by our model that really targeting, domestic work to do this is the best option for overall sustainability.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, I'd love to chat with you on supply chains too.
Yeah.
I'm a total geek.
Wayne Kramer, there's a lot of guitars sitting in a lot of basements gathering a lot of dust. Does your project have the ability to accept donations from people who might want to get those to people in jail?
As a rule, we don't encourage people to send us guitars because usually they're used guitars and they're gathering dust because they're pieces of junk and nobody wants to play them anymore. And it ends up costing us more to get the guitars into shape. And it also doesn't speak to the seriousness with which we take our mission. If I can't at least put a new guitar in a guy's hand, to give him something that's all tore up and doesn't work, doesn't send the right message, Sometimes if the guitar is a particularly valuable guitar, like it has like a vintage guitar or something, and we can use it as a fundraiser, and we could sell it in an auction or something like that, we would be interested. But generally, people are better off if you want to help us just by making a PayPal donation. It's very simple. You just go to the website and we try to make it as painless as possible.
I've got a 63 Gibson Melody Maker. I was just saying I've got a 63 Gibson Melody Maker. I'd love to put your way, even though it isn't auctionable. It will get a lot more use, and it's in perfect condition.
I'd be happy to take that one.
Totally.
That's a good one. That one would be valuable to us.
I would be honored to send it that way.
That would be terrific. Wow, thank you so much. Good looking out, bro. Good looking out.
Wayne and Eric, thank you so much for telling us your stories, and thank you for your attention. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.